Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. This is part 2 of the IP panel that began a couple weeks back. We have brought the dream team back here to help us unpack some more problems in the NFT space regarding IP and the law, and also to talk about some of the solutions that might exist for those problems. So joining us today, we have some of the folks you'll recognize from last time. Max Kernan, the CEO of Remaster, Alex Modell, COO of Remaster, also a trained lawyer himself. We have Jeremy Goldman, who is an IP lawyer who focuses on copyright and technology at Frankfurt, Kernet, Klein & Sells, who really has carved out a practice for himself that is basically entirely supporting Web3 projects at this time. So again, he works with some familiar names to all of you, so he recuses himself from time to time when talking about these issues in specifics. We have Daniel Barsky, who is an IP and technology lawyer with Holland and Knight, and he co-directs the startup clinic at the University of Miami. And finally, we have Sarah Odenkirk with us this time. Had some cross wires last time. She wasn't able to make it, but she is the partner and co-chair of art law and the NFT practice group at Cohen Debates, Abrahams, and Shepherd. Quite the mouthful of an introduction, but I'm so glad to have you all here.
Great to be here again.
Great to be back.
Excited for the sequel. It's going to be better than the original.
Yeah, running it back.
It's only true for Ace Ventura or Lethal Weapon, potentially.
The Empire to the Star Wars.
We're more like Godfather Part 2, okay? That's what we're going for here.
Fortunately, we have a great lead in Sarah, so.
We do, yeah. We have Sarah this time, so we must be better.
The pressure.
A couple things, but we're going to dive into here, but a couple of caveats before we start. So first, this is not legal advice. We, of course, always say not financial advice in this podcast. In this case, it is not legal advice. We are joined by 4 lawyers, I guess, on this call, but please don't go and take action on your project based on specific advice given here. Also, if you have not checked out the first part of this series, please go do that first. It sets the base and the foundation for a lot of what we're going to talk about now. It's an awesome episode. I virtually never listen to my past podcast episodes because it just makes me anxious, but I did go back and listen to this one in preparation for this second conversation. And I was like, damn, this is good. This is a good episode. So all credit to y'all who really break things down exceptionally well. We talk about the difference between trademark and copyright in that episode. We really break down some specific contracts like the Bored Ape Yacht Club license and terms and conditions, and really get into some of what's vague there, what we can know based on that license. Gave our thoughts on the Ryder Ripps lawsuit that's out. And we then identified some additional thorny areas of IP rights when it comes to NFTs and the blockchain. So we are going to dive deeper now into that thorniness and also, excitingly, talk about some potential solutions that Remaster is working on. But before we get into all of that good stuff, I do have to ask that you please subscribe to this podcast if you are listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Or yes, Alex is pointing, or subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. It would mean the world to me and help this show grow. And then before we dive into all the good stuff, here is a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors.
There is a brand new staking feature in the Ledger Live app today. We all like staking the assets that we're bullish on, and now you can stake 7 different coins inside the Ledger Live app. Cosmos, Polkadot, Tron, Algorand, Tezos, Solana, and of course Ethereum. With Ledger Live, you can take money from your bank account, buy your most bullish crypto asset, and stake that asset to its network, all inside the Ledger Live app. Through a partnership with Figment, Ledger also lets you choose which validator you want to stake your assets with. And Ledger is running its own validating nodes, offering a convenient way to participate in network validation, and it even comes with slashing insurance. Ledger Live is truly becoming the battle station for the bankless world, so go download Ledger Live. If you have a Ledger already, you probably already have it, and get started securely staking your crypto assets. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. CoinShift even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, CoinShift is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and CoinShift makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Okay, so I want to start getting into these thorny problems and the solutions to these thorny problems that we really started to get into last episode. And Max, I think you do a really good job of breaking down this thorniness. We're going to take it in a couple parts. I think the first part we want to address is this problem that you keep raising, which is that the blockchain is really good at helping us identify ownership, right? I own this token. If I sell this token to you, you own this token. And that token being some combination of like a smart contract and pointing to an art asset on IPFS. But what this space has evolved into is this token also has all these rights associated with it. That's the quote unquote utility that we think matters so much in NFT land. And we do not at this point have a really good, those rights are not in that smart contract along with the token that we just bought. So it's almost like there's this missing middle communication layer connecting the token that we purchased with the rights that are supposedly associated with that token. And the fact that we don't have this communication layer can cause some problems. So I just gave that overview, but Max, maybe starting with you, do you want to elaborate on that? And then, you give a good example, I think, with real estate, and then maybe start talking about how Remaster is approaching this problem.
Yes. So first off, you actually did an exceptionally good job at
I just listened to you explain it in the last podcast episode, so I think I pretty much
listened
verbatim
to
you. But
myself explain it again because maybe I'll be a little rusty. But no, fundamentally, you're exactly correct. The blockchain is fantastic at proving possession, ownership, provenance. So ownership of these tokens associated to wallet addresses, how they transact from one wallet to the next. And these tokens, as Jeremy basically stipulates with his copyright layer cake, points to different components. With NFTs that are, so popular right now, digital collectibles, art, images, part of that NFT actually points to a specific file that's not actually held within the NFT. So that same high-level concept exists in relation to rights, ownership rights. So NFTs, which are tokens, effectively digital assets, we understand the asset and the possession of the asset is handled by the blockchain, but the issue is in relation to the permissions around utilizing these assets. And right now, why we're seeing such a this prescient use case is in relation to digital assets, specifically art, and commercial rights. Commercial rights are permissions to utilize this specific work of art in a specific way. All of these utilities essentially are defined in these legal contracts that are written in text by, some of these lawyers right on the call right now have done an amazing job writing the actual lexicon around permissioned use of these said assets. The issue is that in the blockchain, or on the blockchain, which is a hyperliquid environment, pseudo-anonymous environment, most of these contracts are held on Amazon Web Services, IPFS at best, but they are static files that exist in their own as their own entity, and they don't actively communicate with the actual asset. So you have asset, which the ownership and possession and permission around using that asset is governed in the actual smart contract, the ERC 721 logic. So transfer from, it's very, very primitive logic. It's, vending machine logic. I put money in and, the asset effectively transfers from one wallet to the next. Complex permissions such as commercial rights or other utilities that are defined in these legal contracts don't actively communicate with the asset. They're written in actual text. So you have this disconnect between what the law, lawyers, creators want you to actually do with your asset, the permissions, what you can or cannot do with your asset, and the actual on-chain logic that's happening on the blockchain. So what Remaster is doing is effectively working with lawyers, utilizing their custom lexicon that they write so well, associating specific logic with the actual text and permissioning based on what that actual text says. So if you're talking about a license, for example, a license essentially is a permission to utilize an asset in a specific way. So the way we go about it is permissioning people to add specific subcontracts associated to these specific assets. So without getting into too much granular detail, you can effectively imagine the permissions of a legal contract having on-chain actionability through actual logic, because we're turning a legal contract into its own smart contract. So now you have a legal contract that exists as a smart legal contract, and then there are a few additional functions within this new ERC 721 that are bound together, and the actual legal contract can add more complex permissioning around how this NFT is utilized by the token holder and is interacted with and transacted on the blockchain.
So I'm going to pull the lawyers into this in a second to talk about, like, in the absence of this, what are some of these like worst case scenarios we could see? But Max, going off of that and you explaining what Remaster is doing, could you speak about it in specifics? Like, could you give an example of what you might do with a Remaster smart legal contract, or how you might use that in a practical way?
Yeah, happy to. So in this first project that we're actually doing with the Haas brothers, Multibeast, and UTA. So the Haas brothers, have 20 years of brand equity that they would like to protect, but they also want to engage within this Web3 ethos of allowing the community to engage in a new methodology of ownership and ownership rights. The issue that we're contending with in this space now is you basically have two options. It's, I'm going to give you rights and I'm never going to sue you. And I'm sure I'm going to get pushback from all of his lawyers, but I'm going to say it anyway. Or the counterpoint of that is, I'm keeping all of these rights, and if you do anything, I will sue you. So there is no nuance, there's no balance to that, because there's been no infrastructure to allow these things to actively communicate. So what we're effectively doing is saying, you own this asset, you own this collectible, but you will have the permission to engage in some of these licenses as vetted based on what the creator is saying. So the creator is the one generating the asset. They should have the ability to determine how they want people to use these assets. So they will be bringing licenses to the ecosystem that the community will be able to opt in and exercise their own unique ownership rights based on, certain eligibility requirements. But it's effectively a way to have a more hybrid approach of imparting certain ownership rights to the community and having them engage with these licenses or ownership rights as, things effectively come up. So to be specific, you could imagine, and I'm going to talk about vagaries here, but specific vagaries. You can imagine the Haas brothers bringing a large apparel deal, for example, to the community and saying, hey, we're going to permission eligible token holders to engage with this specific license. So we're effectively turning on the specific ownership right in relation to apparel.
This deal.
Right, exactly. So you have this base contract, which determines ownership rights of possession of the actual asset. And then this specific license, which is a subcontract, which inherits the logic and variables from these preceding mother contracts, if you will. And certain token holders with the necessary permission and eligibility status will be able to engage directly in these licenses and by their own volition, opt in or opt out to some of these larger brand deals.
And tactically speaking, is that like they sign a thing, they click a I agree button?
Yeah, so from that perspective, they will have to actually look through the specific base contract. They'll have to go through the actual licensing agreement. This licensing agreement is dynamic and will actually inherit their wallet address and all of the necessary variables associated to that. And they will verifiably have to sign that agreement, not just, a PDF DocuSign agreement and not just a MetaMask signature. We're actively adding a few additional components to utilizing MetaMask, not in terms of creating a brand new signature product, but the way that we're compiling the constituent information of what's associated with a MetaMask signature. So just to get a little specific there, MetaMask, when you sign something on the blockchain, there is a hash associated to a blockchain transaction. But if you wanted to find the context of what that user actually signed, it's only associated to a blockchain transaction. So that blockchain transaction is not actually connected to the specific legal contract associated with that blockchain transaction. So there's a huge disconnect.
So it's again, the ownership piece is clearly established. You're signing away ownership, and that's obvious. What's not obvious is that you're also signing away rights that maybe you had associated with that. And so that's where this disconnect exists. Okay.
Right. So what we're working on as just one component of enforceability that we're adding is, and I'm sure all of these lawyers will be able to talk significantly better about this concept of privity and manifestation of assent, to ensure that users, downstream buyers, are actually providing their conscious acquiescence to the actual signature. And we will verifiably be able to prove through this sort of logic of, the e-sign Act of 2000, which is already established. But instead of verifying all of the information from a centralized source, such as, DocuSign, HelloSign, Adobe Sign, whatever, we will be pulling various constituent components from the blockchain. So the text of the legal contract stored on IPFS, the smart contract logic associated with this legal contract, the actual NFT, the text as rendered on this variable, on this legal contract. And in that sequence of events, be able to verifiably take to a judge this hashing sequence of, hey, this person located at this specific wallet address, we can get into anonymity later, but effectively signed this document with this specific text as rendered on this specific date on this specific time, and now compile all of this information together to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person provided their acquiescence consciously and actively.
Okay, we'll get more into all of that and the practicalities and what you're describing with the solution. But stepping back, I'd love to bring the lawyers in here to kind of explain, like, in the absence of this, like, what could go wrong? So, I want to do a whole part 2 on the transfer of assets, which we've already started to get into because it's tied in with all of this. But this core problem, which is that the rights that are associated with my token are sort of abstracted away from any interaction I have in buying that token. What are scenarios that could play out that might be bad? Like, could I be sued because I don't actually have commercial rights over this thing and I'm trying to use them commercially? Like, what could go wrong? Maybe Sarah, I'll start with you since you're our newcomer, unless you want to punt it to somebody else.
Well, I'm sure that we all have things to say about this because this is, of course, exactly what we're focusing on right now. And Max actually used a term that I think is really important, which is the hybrid approach. And so I think that in the absence of having something that is definitively attached to the token, what we have is we have a hybrid approach that we're looking at to figure out what rights are transferring or not transferring with each of the tokens. What that does is it creates a lot of opportunity for there to be inconsistent language, for there to be inconsistent connection between the collector of the NFT and what's been stated in terms of what those rights are. And so if we've got something, for instance, and I know that both Daniel and Jeremy can speak to this as well, a lot of what we're doing is creating terms and conditions for websites where these tokens are being dropped and sold. Those terms and conditions live on the website and they're not attached to the token, which means that people have to somehow know where to go back to. Now, it's relatively easy when you're talking about projects that are well known, but not all the projects are Bored Apes or CryptoPunks. There are a lot of other projects out there, and it's not so clear and evident to the holders of those tokens that they need to go back to the website and read the terms and conditions. You'll also see information in the frequently asked questions on the website. Those FAQs may be different in some way from the terms and conditions, and then which one is going to control. Then you may have some information that's attached separately to the token itself. And that's the thing that I keep advocating for, is that if you have rights that you want to delineate for a particular asset, you need to separately write it out and attach it through the metadata of the token itself so that it travels with the NFT, and anybody who's interested in figuring out what rights travel with the NFT, all they have to do is look at the metadata of that token and follow that link to see that the articulation. But again, that articulation could differ from what's on the website. So part of our jobs as lawyers is to look at all of the different places where that language could live so that we have consistency, not only in what's stated, but also, we're paying attention to how people access that and what that means down the road, because you're absolutely right. What will and has been happening and is going to continue to happen is that it will result in lawsuits when people are doing things that they're either not authorized to do and don't realize it, not authorized to do and do realize it, or that things have been unclearly stated. And so there's truly a miscommunication as to what was intended to be transferred.
Let me ask a specific hypothetical. Like, is a risk here as things are currently constructed? I mentioned last time the hypothetical example of like Jimmy suing Ryder Ripps for use of his Bored Ape in a derivative work. Could Ryder's defense come back and say, you actually never had commercial rights to this to begin with because you never signed a thing or on this terms and conditions on this website is so abstracted away from this token you own that a judge could like throw out the case on the grounds that Jimmy actually doesn't have those commercial rights to begin with. Is that a risk because these two things are sort of abstract from one another?
I mean, I think you're going to have risks, and Daniel and Jeremy, please jump in, but I think you're going to have risks at every single level of the analysis as to whether things are protectable to begin with, as to if they are protectable, what rights were transferred or not transferred. The copyright law does allow for licenses to be given that don't require signature of the creator. If you're giving away rights, and I imagine you spoke a bit about CC0 in the last podcast. We can get back into that again today if it makes sense. But there are different ways to manage rights, and but normally speaking, the purchaser does not receive copyrights to the underlying asset. Unless there is a transfer that is in writing signed by the person holding the copyright. So that creates, of course, a very specific area where there could be some challenges.
And it's possible that Jimmy, being who Jimmy is, like has that from Yuga Labs on a one-to-one basis. But then if we look at like a bigger picture here, like, okay, so maybe there's sort of some one-to-one thing that happened, but like does just an abstract kind of terms and conditions on a website Yuga Labs to 10,000 people, does it kind of, if it says it confers that right, does it confer that right? And I feel like the answer I'm getting is like,
I think, I think there are problems, but I actually think that it does confer that right. I don't think that's really unsettled. I actually think we've been operating in a world of open source licenses and Creative Commons licenses for decades now. I think I mentioned during the last episode, there has been very little litigation around those issues, but I think it's generally accepted that if you're the creator of something, and let's put aside whether they're copyrightable, and I think it might depend on the NFT project, but I think a lot of the artwork that we're discussing, that you discuss on your podcast, Carly, I believe most of it, vast majority, should get copyright protection. Let's put that aside. Artist creates a piece of artwork, and they announce publicly, and they put a document that is their document. It's not a forgery. They put it up on the website, and they say, people that acquire, copies of this through this means or that, this is going to be the license that's attached to them. Something that's, what you might call an open license. It's kind of, a community license, a general use license. Those, I believe, are enforceable. I don't think that there's much challenge that those rights are enforceable. So I don't think that's where, I think if Ryder came back to Jimmy and said, hey, you don't have those rights, I don't think the court's really going to hear that argument when there's a document right there that was published by the creator, by the author, saying you do have those rights. I don't think the court will really entertain that. In my opinion, there is risk with all of this, but I think Max really nailed it on the head. I think the value that platforms like the one Remaster is working on, the value that they bring is about bringing this ecosystem to the next level. It's allowing it to evolve and expand because it's very limited in the way it is right now. Because like Max said, Max, you mentioned two paradigms, which is give all the commercial rights to people or keep all the rights. The third one is one Sarah just mentioned, which is CC0. I'm going to give all the IPO rights away to everyone, not just the holders, but the entire community. And I think that for a fully decentralized ecosystem that involves IP to materialize, You need to have nuance. You need to have the ability to grant licenses for some situations, but not others, to grant it for some countries, but not others, to do it based on duration, on type, on the, proposed derivative work. If you're an artist like the Haas brothers, you're going to be very protective over the uses of your artwork and what people do. But, you could imagine somebody that owns one of these pieces and saying, hey, I just made a really cool animation that using my artwork that I want to feature on this platform or that platform. And they might say, you know what, we love this. Great, go for it. And they might say, great, go for it. Let's split the revenue. They might say, go do it and take all the revenue. They may say, let's donate it. You could imagine a million different arrangements that could happen. And to me, you can't do that without in the present system. So to me, the risk of the present system is a little bit less about the risk that NFT owners are going to be sued for, not having rights that they think they have. I think that people that have commercial rights have them. It's more about the limitations that the current system brings on the market.
But I think, Jeremy, you're bringing up a really good point about all the nuances in between, because it's not just keep all the rights or give away all the rights. There's everything in between. I think the real problem comes in changing those rights. So if you put out one day that you're giving certain rights and then you decide, I don't really like that, I'm going to change it, and you change it within the terms and conditions, that's a problem.
So that's a big rabbit hole I would love to go down. But right before we do that, Max giving the thumbs up. Before we do that, help me understand why we couldn't create this nuance within the current system. Why couldn't we just have more nuanced terms and conditions that outline, okay, it's this for this country, it's this for jurisdiction? Like, why does it need to be taken off of the website and put somewhere else?
When you get downstream, you've got an NFT that's completely separated from the terms and conditions of the original website where it was dropped, and there's not necessarily any connection that can be made. And so people aren't going to go digging for that information.
It's at that transfer piece.
Right. I was going to say there's a couple concepts that we need to make sure we're clear on here. There's the concept of, can it transfer the rights? And I think all the attorneys agree, theoretically, under legal theory, yes, it can. Terms and conditions on website, et cetera. The other side of that is, does it, okay, and then prove it. And that's the problem, because you can't, if you get into a lawsuit for whatever reason, you can't just run into court and say, well, yeah, the terms and conditions said so, judge. You actually have to get those terms and conditions into evidence, and you have to prove that those were the terms and conditions that existed at the time of origin. And that's a lot of the issue that we're having to deal with, is having to say, okay, right, this isn't like when you buy a house right now, right? And there's a deed, and you can go to the county recorder's office and you can follow it all the way back, and you can say, okay, here's the first deed, the second deed, third deed, and you can take it all the way through. It's all there. It's all time recorded. We know what happened when, because they put them in a book sequentially. Here, if I go back to, say, the Yuga Labs website, okay, I see a terms and conditions there. How do I know that's the terms and conditions that existed on the date that particular NFT was minted? I don't know. And then I've got to get that into court, and I've got to prove it somehow if I'm in a dispute. And again, I don't know. And I'm using litigation as an example here. Keep in mind, this is also applicable if you're conducting due diligence on a transaction of some sort. Somebody says, hey, somebody comes to me and says, hey, Dan, I want to invest a bunch of money in this company, but I need to make sure that they own all the IP or they've got all the rights that they claim to have. Same kind of analysis is going to apply. Okay, well, did they own the rights? What did they give away? And what is the current state of the ecosystem there? So those are two the can and did and prove it are three very different things.
Go ahead, Alex. And then
one of the things that we're working on at Remaster is this idea of legal provenance, like an ether scan for legal signatures that you could verify on a decentralized website that looks at the blockchain and says this MetaMask that owned this digital asset at the time signed the terms and conditions or did not sign the terms and conditions. I think in circling back to a few things that you brought up, Carly, one is, let's put Jimmy aside for a second, because Jimmy's special. We all know Jimmy's special. Shout out to Jimmy. I'm one of the 5,000 or 10,000 Bored Ape holders that was duplicated in the Rider Rips situation, and I did not file copyright. There are two components to that. One, if I was the original minter, very clear direct provenance between Yuga signing the terms on the site and acquisition of the digital asset. If I'm a reseller or a third, second, fourth owner of this digital asset, that nexus gets pulled apart. Jeremy did bring up a great point on the last podcast, shout out to part one of this, that if you're relying on the representations in those terms and conditions, it's hard to say that you didn't read them, right? It's hard to say that they're unenforceable. The second component to that, right, is I think we mentioned previously, Yuga Labs hired artists, I believe, they were work for hire Zeneca, to create the images and components along with others. And the body shape, the hat, the jacket, the ears, etc. I'd be hard pressed to find any judge to not say that did not include a modicum, which is the only requirement to be imbued copyright.
Modicum of creativity. In a tangible form. And there's a great Twitter thing of like the actual original hand drawings, which I somehow found in a very deep dark web. But that clearly has copyright associated with it. Now, the mixture of the hat and the jacket, or the robot body versus this body, yes, that was auto-generated upon mint, but the constituent components of it are for sure have copyright protection associated with it. So I'd be hard pressed to find that Yuga did not have the original copyright. Again, this is my opinion and not that of Remaster, but that Yuga had the original copyright that was based on the terms and conditions and license on the website, that was then passed, as it says, you own the underlying art completely, which is a big component of it. Yes, you have hard issues with Title 17, and copyright transfers have to be in writing, and ownership, as it says on the terms and conditions, is entirely mediated by smart contract. And fortunately, I was like one of the, besides the degens out there, going through the entire like 1,800 lines of smart contract code. It doesn't mention copyright transfer. It does mention a DM Gargamel, apparently in the Discord, which is kind of funny, by a smart contract developer. A shout out to anyone who actually finds that besides me. But it brings up some interesting components that I think you need to consider in making this analysis. You just made this point about like copyright transfer, and I want to double click on this for a second, which is that we established last time that there's sort of two different things. There's full copyright transfer, and then there's granting people licenses to use copyright in various ways. And in licenses that allow you to use copyright in various different ways, there's exclusive and non-exclusive licenses to use that copyright in different ways, and those each have different implications. In a case of like full copyright transfer, the law stipulates that you need to have a signature in order for that copyright transfer to go through. And I'm going to have you guys confirm that. But and that obviously would pose all sorts of issues in this world, because we don't have that kind of thing happening right now, where we have like actual signatures, and a MetaMask signature would not count for this. So that full copyright transfer thing, as it currently stands, seems like it's sort of off the table. But these granting licenses for people to use copyright could still be on the table. Is that a correct summary?
I would say so. And, Jeremy and I were just talking about this yesterday, about how, and this is going to be maybe a non-obvious comment, but ultimately copyright ownership might not be what really matters. What really matters is the licensing of the rights that you can then use. So I see the waving. So, ultimately, it doesn't really matter if you transfer the copyright to the subsequent owners or not. What you want to know is, what can I do with it? People aren't really that interested in registering their copyrights. That's not the end game here. The end game is, what derivative rights can I make? What commercial use can I make of this? And of course, we've got the added issues of a lot of this being pseudonymously executed. So, you've got to, when you're creating the licensing terms, you've got to think about enforcement. And so there are a couple of things that I think Remaster is working on that address not only the ability to articulate the licensed rights that travel on, and whether that's exclusive, non-exclusive, and Carly, the other element to that would be whether it's sublicensable or not, or whether it's exclusive to the owner, because that becomes a huge issue in the creation of derivative works. But also figuring out how to indicate that within the smart contract structure and logic.
I wanted to echo and amplify what Sarah just expressed so eloquently. And there's a reason for it, Carly, and I'll bring it up. There's this report that's floating around by Galaxy Digital. I don't know if you saw this, but Galaxy Digital put out this sort of I think it's very clickbaity, salacious report where they say, when you buy an NFT, you don't actually obtain any IP ownership at all. And they suggest that even the projects that grant broad commercial rights, you're not really getting anything at all. You're just getting a license, is the sort of the suggestion. Like, you're not getting copyright, you're just getting a license. And they're shouting this from the rooftops. And I think that what Sarah just, zoomed in on is so critical for the community to understand that this is what we call in law school a distinction without a difference, for the most part. Okay. And I'm going to read now from the Copyright Act, one sentence from the Copyright Act. We're going to do one sentence from a statute. And it's very simple. And it says that it says the owner of any particular exclusive right, that means like an exclusive license, right? The owner of any particular exclusive right is entitled to the extent of that right to all of the protection and remedies accorded to the copyright owner by this title. Okay. That means that when you get an exclusive license, and I would submit that even if it doesn't have the word exclusive, if it's talking about a commercial license that's going out to the owners of these NFT projects, and it says you have a broad commercial right, or it says you have an exclusive right, that you have all of the protection and remedies accorded to the copyright owner of this title. It also, by the way, note that it says the owner of any particular exclusive right. So Copyright Act talks about owning an exclusive license, and they talk about you have all the rights of a copyright owner. So this suggestion that just by not having the whole pie, the entire copyright, you're somehow in a lesser position than a licensee is just plain wrong. And so that is just miseducation that I believe is putting out there for clickbait and to create controversy that I don't believe actually exists.
We're going to clip this. This is the moment. We're going to clip this moment in the podcast, circulate that on Twitter.
And I invite Galaxy Digital to come on and debate me on this.
Novogratz, come on.
Anywhere, please.
Yeah, but the concept that I want to highlight there is like copyright, license. It's all a permission to do something with your asset. And if that permission is decentralized to the point where if we agree to this term and I'm not violating anything, then this contract will not change based on my own understanding. It cannot change. So like for one example, when we talk about decentralized terms and conditions, royalties is a big sort of, I think royalties actually just changed of one of the MEBITS contract. And it may say in that terms and conditions, hey, we reserve the right to change these royalties whenever we want. And forget about the legality of that. If I'm a MEBITS holder and the creator changes the royalties without my knowledge, it is materially affecting my asset. And if I haven't actually provided my conscious awareness or acquiescence, because I haven't utilized some of the commercial rights, but I'm just holding on to this asset passively, and now they're upping the royalties, that materially changes the value of my asset from a liquidity perspective. So
could you sue? Would you have grounds to sue in that scenario?
Not if that's what you agreed to.
I mean, yeah, that's why. Go for it, Daniel.
I was going to say, and that's why there is maybe in terms of a pure litigation standpoint, there can be very limited differences to no differences. Just difference without a distinction between ownership and a license. But in terms of valuation, I'll say that usually ownership is valued at higher than a license, even an exclusive license. There's something that attaches to ownership that is worth a little bit more money.
I'm trying to keep pulling us back to what is the consequence of this murkiness? And then Max, I want you to finish your thought. But so in this, like, what is the consequence of this murkiness if MEBITS changes the royalty structure in their license? in the current environment where I never kind of consciously signed anything and at no point, like, what is the consequence to that murkiness and the fact that these terms and conditions keep changing? You know, in a worst case scenario, let's say, and it could be litigating against now Yuga Labs, who owns MEBits.
But that's what Daniel actually just pointed out, is that the value of the asset may change based on that uncertainty. And so if when you purchase the asset, you say that you agree to the terms and conditions, and the terms and conditions say we can change the royalty at any time, then there's an argument to be made that you bought it with the understanding that that was the structure that you were buying into. And so that's what you've bought. But when you've got, again, downstream purchasers who aren't necessarily going back and reading those terms and conditions and don't know that those are terms and conditions that apply to that asset, that's where it becomes very murky. And that's where you have the likelihood of lawsuits coming up where the downstream purchaser goes, well, I didn't know that you could impact the value of my asset at any time without my input. And that's not okay. And I'm going to challenge that. And the MEBits guys or whoever are going to say, well, that's the way we set up the project. It's your problem that you didn't take a look at the rules. And that's, again, why I keep shouting from the rooftops or spitting into the wind, depending on the day, that we need to attach these things to the NFTs. And that's more than just having a signed contract. I mean, that's taking the remaster capabilities, but taking it, again, a step further, where it's not just about putting it into the smart contract. It's about making sure that you have that articulation securely associated and embedded within the NFT structure.
You asked for worst case scenario in all of this. Everything we've talked about are the one-off, potential lawsuits between, the issuer and the holder, or, maybe your company is not worth as much on a fundraise as you thought it would be. These are all, things that affect one person here or there. I would submit the worst case scenario is that a whole bunch of people lose a whole bunch of money and Congress gets involved. And now we start getting heavy-handed regulation handed down by people who do not fully understand the industry and are just taking broad whacks because there's public outcry against what has happened. I would submit that might be the worst case scenario here.
Or perhaps that people who would otherwise be onboarded to the Web3 environment lose complete faith in this structure as a place to operate in any legitimate way and just don't participate. And then you've got a problem because you don't have ongoing onboarding, which means that the whole ecosystem suffers and does not take off in the way that it has the potential to.
Yeah. So there's a few things, I guess, really to unpack. Number one is, and it sort of ties back into your infrastructure, why the current infrastructure is not working for today, Carly. And it's primarily based on, because we're using Web 2 legal infrastructure. It's why Jack Dorsey is like, I'm building Web 5, because what's going on today is people are using the current legal system that has worked for large, tech enterprise, this like terms of service agreement where people are accessing their content based on a terms of service. But when I'm accessing to content, whether it's a subscription, I don't actually own that specific asset. So access to the content is conditional based on me logging onto the website every single time. When I own an asset, I'm effectively perpetually logged on for the duration of ownership of that asset. So right now we're trying to find ways of large brands or large creators limiting their own liability in relation to whether or not they can or cannot do stuff. And that's fine. We don't have to get in there. It's more existential. But why it doesn't work in this ecosystem, we've talked about downstream buyers. The blockchain is the blockchain. Web3 is Web3 because of this level of hyperliquidity, where assets can move around fluidly in a hyperliquid, trustless environment. And the bulk of these transactions are happening on these marketplaces, OpenSea, Luxor, whatever, essentially. And because there's no infrastructure in relation to the signing and the legality of the actual contracts that are being imparted, there's a massive issue that we've all highlighted. But just to get a little more granular as to why it's a big issue, and I think Miles Jennings actually highlights this in one of his A16Z papers, where you can actually see like the blockchain. Then you have smart contract protocol layer. Then you have the client layer, which is effectively where OpenSea, all of these platforms sit. On that client layer, which is not as foundational as a smart contract protocol layer, they say, these are the terms of service. The only way you can use OpenSea is by agreeing to our terms of service. Yeah, you sign a MetaMask thing, but that's, it's a click wrap agreement of you agreeing, having access to OpenSea, for example. And I'm just using OpenSea because it's the biggest player. I'm not pointing blame directly to OpenSea. But effectively, because the access to these assets is based on a user complying with OpenSea's terms of service, my experience of my asset is subjectively based on OpenSea's platform's terms of service, even though it's my asset. And even though my asset exists on this entire protocol. So why this infrastructure breaks down is Bored Ape, Seth Green had his Bored Ape stolen. And it was verified, Seth Green went to OpenSea and said, hey, my Bored Ape is stolen. So the asset was flagged on OpenSea. OpenSea said, hey, you're not allowed to transact this asset on our platform, limiting their own liability. But that asset was still able to transact on 30 other marketplaces that don't care about limiting their liability from that specific perspective. So now you have OpenSea's platform terms of service, which doesn't actually impede the transactability of the asset. And this is one of the real issues that is being highlighted when you have legal contracts, which determine asset flow, permissions of interaction with an actual asset, but they're not communicating. They're not remotely linked with one another. So this asset can transact on LooksRare, but not OpenSea. And now we're starting to realize that the breakdown of this infrastructure is not supported because of this lack of, yes, enforceability, but it's why at Remaster, we're adamant about shifting the needle from retroactive enforceability, which is, hey, I can prove that you've done all these things wrong, so now I'm going to sue you, or now I'm going to rectify the action, versus building programmatic logic alongside the intent of the creator and the lexicon of these lawyers, deploying that as its own smart contract. So you can build legal rails, bumper rails. You go bowling and putting out the side rails to limit the potential misuse of the asset, whether it's intended or unintentional. I mean, no one has any idea what they're doing in this space. Let's just be honest. And assets are being misused all the time, not by bad actors necessarily. So providing bumpers allows not just enforceability from a large Fortune 500 company to feel comfortable, but just from a misusing to allow genuine consumers who don't have a physics degree, who don't have like a PhD in computer science, to interact in this space without feeling like their stuff is going to get stolen. I mean, it happens all the time. Like you see CEOs of these Web3 companies, including myself, who have had assets stolen from phishing attacks just because of the lack of UI, UX enforceability. It's a learning process.
At the core, are you saying in that last bit that we need to take this stuff out of the platform level? Right now, it's like subjective.
Yes.
Like OpenSea can decide one thing, LooksRare can decide another thing. Magic Eden has come out and said, we're not going to freeze your assets. Like it's taking it out of the platform layer and putting it that layer below, right? Like saying, or 2 layers below. Asset. It's saying it needs to be connected to the original NFT smart contract itself.
Yes.
The rules of the asset. Does that have any implications for individual buyers then?
The implication is, you're agreeing to something. You understand the terms around how you can interact with your asset as defined by what the creator is actually intending. If you don't agree with that, and no one agrees with that, then the asset won't be created in the first place. So it's like this weird chicken or the egg thing of like, I'm a creator, I want to control how people are using my asset, or not control, but it's of my own volition. If you agree to that, we've both agreed. So you still have this permissioned infrastructure based on like law, but now because you're building in logic, once we've both agreed to these terms, now I can't change it, you can't change it unless we both come back again and agree. And that's where the trustless component comes in, and that's where the nuance of Web 2 and Web 3 comes.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com.
MetaMask is the leading Web3 wallet to get you access to everything you need in Web3. If you're just getting started on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. And if you need to fund your MetaMask account in order to buy that NFT that you've been eyeing, well, now you can do that directly through MetaMask. Just click the blue buy button on the home screen. Personally, I'm mad that I've spent extra gas fees transferring money from Coinbase to MetaMask in order to buy NFTs. I've been using MetaMask directly, and it is so much better. You can also buy stable coins and native tokens from Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, CeeLo, and others, and you can do it directly with your debit card, your credit card, through Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there is now an improved buying experience on MetaMask Mobile. You'll only see tokens that are in your region, so it's personalized to you, and you'll get real-time quotes, so you know you're always getting the best deal. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask yet, what are you waiting for? Go try it out. You can learn more about buying cryptocurrencies with MetaMask at metamask.io/buy-crypto.
So help me, I feel like I have this very primitive understanding of your solution. And my very primitive understanding is, okay, you've effectively convinced me that just having some terms and conditions on a website, even if they were super nuanced, while maybe end up covering and protecting all the parties that need to be covered and protected downstream, it's way too tenuous for any of us to want to feel good about that. And so we really need to take this, we need to move away from like, okay, I've got some terms and conditions up here on a website and like, you've all kind of agreed to it, like la-di-da, into something that's a lot more substantive. But when I'm kind of picturing that in my head, I'm picturing like, here's the terms and conditions on the website, and we're now putting it into the smart contract. You're clearly talking about something deeper than that, because you're talking about taking this legal language and actually turning it into programmatic language. And my brain hasn't really caught up to the implications of that or what that tactically means.
Sure. So I guess what it tactically means is, like in these legal contracts, you have text. That is the code around determining what you can or cannot do with your asset. It's like, this is
if then logic. If you do this, then this would happen.
Then I sue you. If you misuse this asset, then I sue you. It's all, that's effectively what legal text is. And it implies that the event has to happen in order for you to say, hey, you did this on this point, you misused this asset. Now, because you agreed to this contract, I can sue you. But in Web3, because of the liquidity, you could have 1,000, 100,000 transactions of an asset in a week. And let's just assume we had this signature infrastructure where every 100,000 users sign the actual contract, and we did have grounds to sue them. How do you litigate 100,000 or 1,000 transactions in the span of a week? Like that sounds like chaos. I mean, maybe this is another conversation, but.
So let me pause you there. Stay on your thought, but I just want to so one thing that you guys are doing, Remaster is doing, if I get it from what you just said, is like creating the capacity for these signatures so that every downstream buyer is in privity with the mothership. These were terms you guys were using last time about what the terms and conditions are at any given point in time, right? So Max, you're selling your Bored Ape to me. In the flow of that process, I'm properly signing something that is effectively like an agreement. I'm agreeing to the terms and conditions that are now attached to this asset in real time while I'm buying them, so that we can look back legally and say, okay, great, Carly agreed to XYZ and Yuga Labs, because I'm buying your Bored Ape or whatever, agreed to XYZ tacitly, like in the moment that this sale happened, and that cleans up some of this from if this was to go to court, right? That's one thing you're saying. Okay, now you're bringing up this point. You're saying it's so liquid. Let's say that that happens 100,000 times. Like, how are we supposed to litigate? And something had gone wrong in one point in that chain. And now it's like, oh my gosh, now what are we doing litigating these 100,000 things? You said that's even in the case where you get these signatures. What are you doing? How is your solution helping with that problem?
Because, as I said before, these legal contracts are text, we're using like English language to determine how people can use their asset. If you can turn that English language into programmatic code, so like
that's why I say that if then is helpful, because if then is basically
right, if then
what code
is super helpful. It's like if you have a certain permission, you can interact with this specific license. If you don't have that permission, you can't engage in that license. So it's this like minority report thing where like you can't commit the crime because you literally just cannot do it. You can't interact with your asset in that specific way.
So for example, it's always helpful in my opinion to get like really specific. So Grails 2 just dropped. And if you have a Moonbird that has Grails traits, you were entitled to Grails, to get a Grails. Now, this is kind of a weird example because this is just token gating and we already have this technology. But like you're saying, if this was sort of like this broader right that was conferred as a part of a terms and conditions, or maybe we can make this apply for your Haas Brothers example, where like they want to partner with an apparel company, you would have logic within the sort of smart legal contract, as you've been calling it, that would allow or prevent certain transactions to go through based on the rights that have been conferred. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Sounds very hard.
That's why I'm not the technical one. Maybe we can do the more technical version and have our CTO on. But
go ahead, Alex.
But yeah, I would say it's actually kind of relatively simple from leveraging the blockchain for what it does great, which is a distributed ledger, right? And it's this wallet, this point in time, owns this digital collectible that has this right to sell a t-shirt. And as soon as that digital collectible is sold on the secondary market, that wallet no longer has the right to sell this t-shirt through this medium.
But how the smart contract doesn't know if I'm selling a t-shirt.
You connect your wallet to essentially an e-commerce site, right? Like a token gate.
Assuming it reminds me of the royalties problem conversation that we're having, where it's really hard. You can't really enforce royalties on chain. And so what it strikes me, and maybe correct me, is like, well, Max is giving me, please chime in on that, Max. I mean, that's the topic du jour.
You can enforce royalties. It's just, this gets more into like some of the issues with standardization and EIP and actually enforcing that stuff. Like if you move into standardization, you have to give up a lot of certain things. If you want every single marketplace to inherit certain logic,
sure, then
you need to give up certain components. But for example, you could theoretically say if you cannot sell this on OpenSea or any place for under 5 Ethereum, and you could bake that in to a smart contract.
Well, okay, so but let's do this, right? Like that gets, because yes, the solution to the royalties problem that I feel like I hear floating around is we could have some centralized list of marketplaces, or some list, maybe a DAO forms it. It doesn't have to be a centralized list, but there is a list somewhere that is contributed to that says these are the whitelisted marketplaces and these are the blacklisted marketplaces based on royalties. And yes, you could have a smart contract that goes and looks and says, okay, is this marketplace on the whitelist or the blacklist, and behave some way accordingly. But there are still lots of ways around that. So I think what you're getting at here is like, you cannot 100% enforce me selling a t-shirt on the blockchain, because I could go out and do it independently myself. But what you are doing is now establishing a precedent where like it becomes a lot easier to win a legal case. It just becomes a lot simpler to win a legal case if I want to sue someone for using my ape that they previously owned on their t-shirt or whatever, and they actually didn't have that right. They signed away that right in this signature moment that now happens when they sold me their asset. It becomes a lot easier for me to go to a judge and prove, hey, they don't have the right to make that t-shirt anymore because look here on the blockchain, certified, provenance, whatever, on this date at this time, they signed away that right and they actually signed it. And that itself may deter, like whatever, that can be a big win without it being like directly enforceable by the smart contract itself.
Yes.
I want to add something that we haven't talked about, which is a real important upgrade and benefit that could be brought by a platform like Remasters. And that's about when, if you get a commercial license and you get rights to do something with your NFT, or if you get utility or benefits, right? Like you get to redeem, get certain merchandise, get tickets to a show, get tacos for life, whatever it is. The problem right now is that there's no visibility and there's no connections that show to a downstream buyer what rights have been exercised, what's been out there already, right? And so if I let's just take an example. If I have a PFP and I've used it on a food truck and I licensed it for a T-shirt, and then I want to go and sell my token.
Yeah,
there's both like the licensing question of like, well, does it cut my legs out from under me? Like once I sell my token, do I have to stop using those things? And I would say, if you look at the new CryptoPunks license, it's very clear about what happens to those rights. And if you have something that you used that's out there in the world, it's been published and used, you can continue using it. But that's also like a one-size-fits-all option. I think what would really, in order for this world to evolve and develop and for people to invest money into these things, they have to have the security that if you get a piece of art and you want to invest money into a derivative project, you want to make a television show, you want to make a video game, and then maybe you want to sell the NFT, subject to that existing license continuing on and being able to continue on. There's no way to do that now. There's no way to tell people about it. And having a platform that sort of identifies and manages and communicates to the market, says, okay, I'm going to buy this. How much juice has been squeezed out of the lemon? What is it that I'm buying? What's the call report on this NFT? Is there merchandise I can still redeem? Did somebody already use that, redeem the tacos for life? What's coming with it? And there's no mechanic for that. And I think we're talking about licensing, but I think the Remaster platform or something like it that allows you to track the different activations that have been executed in connection with the NFT and communicate that is a tremendous a tool and something that the community really needs in order to build this out.
I've used this example before, but it's effectively like, I want to know if the world of women I'm buying has starred in a porno. Like I need to know if she's been like licensed somewhere to somebody to do something like, that I maybe don't want to be associated with. And right now it's just like a black box, what other agreements might exist between a particular asset. And so having that and, kind of, you have this standard, whatever, smart legal contract that I've latched onto that term. And then you can kind of add these sub licenses on top and it all travels with the NFT. So that's no longer a black box. I think you gave the example last time, Max, on the same exact front around real estate. Like if there's like other debts associated with the house or the property, like when you buy a deed to a house, any hindrances that are kind of coming along with it. And we need that in NFTs. Alex, I think there was something you wanted us to circle back to around this issue of litigation and who has a right to sue.
Yeah, and the crucial part is how do we get our foot in the door of court, right? And yes, as an artist, a creative, and et cetera, you immediately get copyright by fixing your modicum of creativity into a tangible form. You actually need to register with the USPTO for a copyright registration. And you could either get accepted copyright or the registration, or you could get a denial and have the grounds to sue. So I think it's crucial that although one may have the copyright, they may not be afforded the rights of copyright protection if it's an unregistered copyright. And just kind of a callback to part one of this terrific podcast. Jeremy, you want to add anything on that, or?
Well, there's two things that come up. One is sort of who has the right to sue, and a copyright owner has the right to sue. An exclusive licensee has a right to sue. Going back to that point of not really, and Sarah's point of there's not always so much of a difference between the rights of a copyright owner and the exclusive licensee. Then what you're bringing, the second point is, what do you need to get into court? And that's a copyright registration. Both an exclusive licensee and the copyright owner can seek a copyright registration. But really, what I think you're getting at is a broader question, which is when you have a collection of 10,000 visual works, there's sort of a logistical administrative problem at the US Copyright Office that there's no easy way to go and register 10,000 works of art. They don't really allow
and very expensive.
And it's expensive when you multiply one. Getting a registration in one piece of art is like under $100, but you multiply that times 10,000, and it's prohibitive. So with the way that generative art is being developed, there's not really a great match. That's something that Sarah should talk about, not me. So
I asked this last time, but just quickly to bring this back to Remaster, one of the questions I asked last time was, okay, let's say I go out and get a copyright registration for my asset, and so I have the right to sue. Does that transfer with the asset, or does the next owner need to go out and try and get a copyright registration? Is that something that Remaster can solve, where that can be now affixed to the smart legal contract and a determination can be made, like it can travel with the copyright registration, the thing you need to actually litigate could be transferred with the asset?
I think the challenge for that is that Remaster can't dictate what the Copyright Office does. And in order to transfer copyright ownership according to the Copyright Office, you have to file a transfer document. And I will say that the computer systems at the Copyright Office are pretty elementary.
They're not 21st century?
They are not. And
that's very generous, Sarah.
It really is a problem that that there's not even a way to really put together a program that can automatically register copyrights, because there's no interfacing with the Copyright Office. So that's a whole other bucket of issues. But I want to raise one other issue.
What a beautiful use for the blockchain, though, Sarah, right? Like to record copyright on the blockchain and publicly available would be a terrific use case for the USPTO and Web3.
Yes, that's very complicated and definitely requires an entirely new conversation. But I want to raise one other really important issue, which is that we're talking about U.S. law right now. A lot of these sales are not necessarily in the U.S. Like we've got jurisdictional issues, and not every country. In fact, the U.S. is the only country that requires registration in order to establish the right to sue. So when we're talking about either assets that are created in other countries or people who are living in other countries buying these things, we've got some bigger problems too.
Yeah, we could have a whole separate podcast on Berne Convention and all the other treaties about recognizing other countries' rights, et cetera. That's going to be a real interesting problem.
It's the layer or layer A that we teased on the end of the last podcast, the authenticity layer.
There's one thing I wanted to circle back, though, just briefly, in terms of, Carly, what you brought up around transferring copyright. Well, that's not something that we are doing, or because we have to contend with, ancient industry, ancient technology, and it's not necessary. What we are able to do is based on these permissions. So licenses, for example, there are two options. If I own a Bored Ape, I could license my Bored Ape to Adidas, for example. Adidas could say, I want the license to follow the NFT, or I want the license to remain with you, the NFT holder, because I actually know who you are. So what that does is put restrictions, either restrictions around the transferability of the asset or restrictions around who can engage with the actual license. So from that perspective, there are certain eligibility requirements to engage with that license with Adidas. Maybe they're like, you need to be from Nebraska, from this specific street. And we could have 5 people fit that eligibility requirement. And if I'm the NFT holder and I'm in a license with Adidas and that license is bound to the NFT, I could only transfer it to those 5 people that meet those eligibility requirements. So we're putting a base layer of legal enforceability. And once you have that limiting factor, you can start to add liquidity back in. On the flip side of that is, I don't want the license to actually transact with the NFT. That's when the downstream buyer needs to be aware that when they're buying this Bored Ape, it no longer comes with that Adidas license. And that's where the due diligence is crucial. So there's 2 options there. Both are entirely feasible. It's all just a function of logic and transparency.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. I've been talking about all the fact that the merge is going through, and that means that 99% of the environmental concerns are going to go away, and how wonderful that is because it makes the water in Ethereum and NFTs that much warmer for brands. And you're describing a very similar thing, which is that there are plenty of brands right now who probably would be very hesitant to engage in a licensing agreement or work with an NFT asset because they're like, if it gets sold and it gets sold to some, somebody, a murderer, or like whatever, like we can't have that brand affiliation or whatever the case might be. And so this now, it sounds like, could give them that security and that feeling of like, all right, I can enter into this because I can clearly stipulate and set all sorts of parameters around what the rules for this asset that's being licensed to me are. And I'll be able to have legal recourse because I'll be able to point to this contract that the two parties signed if it is ever sold. I'll have that legal recourse if they violate that, which is huge. So let me ask, if is this something that can be retroactively, what you're working on, can it be retroactively applied to projects, or like does it have to be new projects launching thinking about this out the gate?
No, it's funny you bring this up now because obviously we can't contend with the NFTs that were already minted, and using our standard ERC 721 with these few additional functions does allow for this to be baked in, for new projects. It's a little more seamless. But for existing assets that are interested in engaging with some of these licenses, we could wrap the asset with this permissioned infrastructure that plugs it into our legal architecture. And then we were also building this sort of commerce, sort of hub where people can communicate and interact with one another all around the transfer of assets, the subdivision of rights, the transfer of those rights together. So we would be able to wrap a Bored Ape, for example. The owner would still, own the Bored Ape, but they would actually own the wrapped contract and certain permissions around interacting with that ape. So one of those permissions is, if it's a Bored Ape and the licensing ability is with the token holder. So if I'm Jimmy ETH and I've wrapped my Bored Ape, I now have permissions to add all of these licenses that comply with our system. And we're adding more and more, every single day. So then I can instantiate those licenses. So for example, I have my NFT, I have a gaming right license, which I've now added on top of this base contract. And now I want that gaming right license to make derivative NFTs of my initial NFT. So Jenkins, the valet, and their sort of derivative assets. From that perspective, you're able to go back and trace all the preceding contracts. Sorry, I have a dog. She loves the spiel.
She's so excited about instantiating rights into a wrapped Bored ETH,
Yeah, she's probably just sick and tired of listening to me talk about this. But yeah, from that perspective, you now are able to have a numerous amount of derivative assets that are all tracing back through this permissioned infrastructure. And because there's this limiting factor of enforceability of like only these people can interact, only these people can transact based on these stipulations, you start to add liquidity back into the system. I mean, the way I like to think about it is maybe it's a little bit of a cheesy analogy, but if, AirTags, Apple AirTags, like the risk of losing your keys after you've slapped an AirTag onto your keys is that much less. And you don't now have to worry about where your keys are every 5 seconds. I don't know if that was the first time trying that analogy. So
I like it. Where my head goes with it, and I don't know if this is like, tell me if this feels right, is like, I'm like, look, AirTags can't 100% foolproof keep you from losing a thing, or like, it's not 100% fail safe, but it's whatever it is, 75% reduction or 90%, whatever, in the likelihood that you end up losing or leaving your keys. And that's, I see, this is honestly what I've been saying about the royalty problem too, is like, what we need to do is just make it like highly inconvenient, or the best we can do is make it really inconvenient to trade without royalties. We can't 100% enforce it because you can over the counter, you can agree to something off chain with somebody and send them a thing and get a payment. Like you just cannot 100% prevent this. But if we can get it down so that it's like really, really inconvenient, we'll at least weed out a bunch of people from doing it. And to me, broadly, what you guys are doing is better than that, because you're still going to be able to solve things. Even if you can't solve something on chain, you're giving a way to solve it in the court system. And so you're going that far, but that's what I take away from.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly right. The one additional thing is, if you can verifiably prove that something has gone wrong, even after the transfer has already happened, you can take that evidence to a court. And some of this contract arbitration stuff that we're working on, where a lawyer, or an arbiter can render a default judgment and potentially rectify the situation after it's already happened. So that, having that layer for super, super, super high valued assets is, I think, crucial if they're ever going to engage in this sort of environment.
So final question. If I'm a new project launching and I'm bought in, I want to prevent any potential litigation, I want to work with you, what do they do?
Well, we're in the process of redoing our website. So I'd say wait until about September 5th before going to our website. Follow us on Twitter, DM us. Our website.
What's the Twitter handle?
Remaster _ IO.
Okay.
That would be probably the best way to actually contact us until our website is live. But I will also say that we are launching our first project with the Haas brothers. We touched on them. Jimmy Eath, shout out to Jimmy, who's actually taking this personality test. It's this interesting thing where
I've taken
tests, it. Yeah. Oh, Carly, I forgot you've actually taken it. So you can actually speak to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can speak to your experience, but
yeah,
we're launching September 19th officially. So
yeah, I've talked about this on Twitter Spaces, but I think we have more people listen to the podcast. So yeah, it was a funny thing. It's not like any personality test you've ever taken, and I took it in a Zoom call with like 5 other people there, I think. So I don't want to give anything away, but this should encourage people to go, and when this project launches, go check it out and check out the personality test. And then imagine taking that test where you had to verbalize your answers to the questions in a room of like 5 people and see what you think.
5 dudes.
I think there was one woman and she was not on camera. So as far as I could tell, it just looked like 5 men.
I think we realized that after we were like, this may have been awkward.
Carly, you could also reach us at Remaster at info@remaster.io for those not
info at Remaster. Wait, say it one more time. Give the full thing.
Info at Remaster REMASTER.io, and it's also on Max's hat for those watching the YouTube stuff.
Yeah, we'll put a link.
Perfect.
We'll put it in the show notes or something. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining for this part 2. There may be parts 3 and 4. We've all been kind of on the behind the scenes talking about potential follow-ups to all this, because I do think getting legal, not legal advice, but legal opinions, perspectives in this space is super valuable, because we're a little bit like cowboys out here running around in the Wild West. And if we want this to go mainstream, we're going to need the grownups in the room to come along. So thank you all so much for joining, as always.
Thank you so much, Carly. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.